In this video, we are going to see on heroes and hero worship, which was written by Thomas Carlyle. Let us see one of his beautiful quotes. The history of the world is but the biography of great men. First, let us get introduced to who is actually Thomas Carlyle. He is a British historian, satirist, essayist, translator, mathematician. He is a polemicist, and his works reflected the deism he had incorporated in his life. He attempted to reconcile romanticism with historical facts. That is, he was a historian and he wanted to reconcile, bring a connection between romanticism and the era in which he lived, and also with the historical facts. He attempted to reconcile between them. Next, these are the contemporaries of Thomas Carlyle. Edward Irving introduced Carlyle to the literary circle where he met Samuel Coleridge. Emerson convinced a Boston publisher for Carlyle and introduced Thoreau's and Whitman's works to him. All would have been familiar. If you're a literature student, you would have been familiar with Samuel Coleridge, Thoreau, and Whitman. So these were some of the contemporaries of Carlyle. In the 1830s, he befriended Wordsworth and John Sterling. He also entered in the literary circles of his younger generation poets and authors like Browning, Tennyson, Dickens, Foster, and Thackeray. Next, the major themes in this piece of work. On heroes, hero worship. It contains a hero as a poet as a third lecture. In the third lecture, which we are going to see, it is about hero as a poet. It clearly shows Carlyle's disenchantment with 19th century and its lack of heroes. He thought people of his age were given to commercialization and self-gratification. According to him, love of God is identical with loyalty to a leader. Carlyle's heroes are all men of practical intelligence. So these were the qualities which Carlyle gave to the person whom he considered to be hero. Carlyle's analysis about Dante as a heroic poet. First, he mentions about the poet Dante. He calls Dante the saint of poetry. Dante loved Beatrice but could not marry her, and he was also banished by his political enemies. Thus, in reality, Dante suffered loneliness and misery, as does a hero. Carlyle quotes that he was world deep, not worldwide. Carlyle praises Dante's intensity and calls him the noble soul which will continue to enthrall readers for ages. So this is the description which is given by Carlyle about Dante and how he considers Dante as the heroic poet. Next, he talks about Shakespeare. What Homer was to Greece, Dante to the Middle Ages, so was Shakespeare to modern ages. Carlyle praises the bard as priceless, a tranquil, unfathomable sea. He is a great house, that is, Shakespeare is a great house, which makes us forget the rude, disorderly raw materials with which it was built. Even the scientific intellect, Bacon, was secondary to Shakespeare. That was the consideration of Carlyle. So Carlyle termed the bard as an unconscious intellect. Next, Carlyle compares Goethe to Shakespeare. He could not sing a heroic warrior unless he himself were at least a heroic warrior. Actually, it's from the text, a line from the text. It describes how Carlyle explains a poet can be a heroic warrior only if he is personally a heroic person, unless such great words cannot come out in poetry. So that is what he explains. Carlyle is bewildered and guesses that Shakespeare too would have suffered in his real life. Otherwise, how could a man visualize so many suffering heroic hearts like Macbeth, Coriolanus, Hamlet, etc.? Next, Carlyle quotes that The King Shakespeare, does he not shine in crowned sovereignty? And he also terms him to be indestructible. Next, I would like to review it and conclude it with my thoughts. Carlyle's thoughts reflected, as I have already mentioned, he was a polemicist. He said that great men should rule and other men should revere them. In this postmodern world, it is hard to accept that because many theories like identity crisis will question Carlyle. Of course, they will question him that each individual has to be recognized. How could you say that one person can be a hero and another should revere you? Next, feminists can also contend with him that why don't heroines or great women come into the scene? Well, it was 1830s when he had written this, and we can find only the prevalent thoughts of that age. And you could get only what you could get from that person in that era, and what was prevalent in that age would reflect in his work.